Emotional intelligence is something that we're all aspiring to have, but sometimes we don't really know what that means. Now, on today's show, we're going to learn all about it. Hi, I'm Joey Buzzsaw, and welcome to the Secret MENS Business Podcast. On today's show, we're going to be speaking to an expert and a podcaster, Daniel Tolson, who's going to be teaching us about intelligence and how emotion can bring us closer to being what we want to be. Daniel, how are you?
Hey Joe, wonderful. Thank you for having me here. Greatly appreciated.
No, thank you. I hear so many good things about you, so I'm really excited to have you on the show and pick your brain a little bit.
Mate, you go for it. And I'm sure half of those things my wife probably won't agree to. She'll tell you about all my bad habits.
Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about you, your background, and I guess what you do at this moment?
I think the big turning point in my life was in 2010. And I got a telephone call at 4 a.m. in the morning. And I've never had a phone call at 4 a.m. in the morning that's good news. It could be a mate saying, hey, I've seen your girlfriend out and about on town, or something's gone wrong. So I got a phone call about 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was the duty controller from Emirates Airline. Now, I used to work with Emirates Airline, and part of my role was to do critical incident stress management and peer support. So it would be very common for me to get a telephone call at 4 o'clock in the morning to say, there's been an accident, there's been a fire, there's been a suicide, can you come and help? So the phone rang and the duty controller said, this is not a peer support call. And I said, well, what is it? They said, your fiance's been involved in an accident.
Wow.
And so the jaw just drops, time freezes, and they say you need to come to the hospital immediately. So I had a big turning point in 2010. And for the next 2.5 years, my wife went through rehabilitation, multiple surgeries. And then we got to the end where we almost lost our daughter 3 times due to miscarriage. And then she was made redundant from her job, and I had to resign from my role as a leader of 17,500 cabin crew.
Well,
so that's where
it all happened at once, in a way.
Just all at once, but it was it just seemed to be a succession of challenges that just came year after year. And we were really learning resilience, we were learning to become emotionally intelligent, and then we realized that just the importance of this skill in today's world.
So do you want to just give our listeners a definition? What is it? What does it mean to be emotionally intelligent?
Well, it's a bit of a buzzword. So I think a lot of people hear it, it gets thrown around in corporate, it's in magazines, and they go, you've got to have emotional intelligence. Well, I grew up in a pawnbroking business. I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, in Penrith, and in Windsor and in Richmond. And in that area, we just called it being street smart.
Right.
So it was the ability to be street smart. You had to know your strengths, you had to know your limitations, but you also had to read the emotional makeup of other people. And you had to quickly decide, is this a good deal to be involved in or not? Is this person trustworthy or not? But it also came about for your ability to influence and persuade. So I grew up in an area where a lot of people didn't have a formal education. However, it did not mean that they weren't successful. The area where I live in Sydney, it's the second wealthiest area, but the majority of these people are not formally educated. They dropped out of school early, they built their businesses from a young age, they've become multi-millionaires, not just because of the inflation of their property, but because of their ability to get along with other people. So emotional intelligence, in my mind, is really being street smart.
Yeah, no, that's the best explanation I've heard ever, because it can come across as a hard word to understand. So if you're street smart, are you saying that you need to be street smart for yourself as well? Like to be able to say, this is not good for me, or I need to step away from that, versus listening to your head and doing things that are going to cause trouble?
I think all of us have a mate, and he's about 5 foot tall, and he walks down the street and he pumps his chest out and he walks tall. And you look at him and you go, gee, do you think you're 6 foot, mate? Like, come on, put the chest away. No, we've all got a mate like that. And what happens here, it's an inaccurate self-perception. And ultimately, it leads to trouble. It's our friend who's the fast driver. He's got the fast car and he drives really fast. But he actually doesn't have the skill to back it up. He's got the acceleration because of the vehicle, but he doesn't have the skill. So emotional intelligence is really understanding my personal strengths.
Yes.
And understanding my limitations. And I learned this when I was in real estate. My uncle, who was my mentor, he said, Daniel, in real estate, enthusiasm will outsell experience 10 to 1. And I said, what does that mean? He said, if you go out and you show people the best characteristics of you, if you work hard and you can deliver on your promise, then you will get paid. He said, but what happens with a lot of other agents is they overpromise and they underdeliver, and they never get paid.
Right.
He said, understand who you are, make a promise that you can keep, deliver on that promise, you'll get paid and you'll get referrals.
Right.
So you've really got to know who you are. And then you've got to set the benchmark for yourself.
Yeah.
And that sets you up for success, where a lot of people, they start their journey of success and they go, I'm going to have $1 million business this year. And you think, well, how much have you earned in the past?
And who are you?
100 grand. It's a big jump. And ultimately, they fail.
So do you think, I'm going to jump a bit because that's a really good point. Do you think that the current climate with social media and people wanting to be famous, do you think that's one of the problems? Is that people are jumping into this new arena, but they're not really spending time figuring out who they are. They just think that they want to be like the other people so they can get rich. Is that something you're noticing?
I think it happened even back in the late 90s when we started to text people. You know, I remember dating these girls via text and they'd send you these messages and you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is a real hottie. She's unbelievable. And then eventually, after about 100 text messages and a couple of games of Snake on the Nokia 5110, you decide that you're going to go out and meet this girl. Then you meet her and she's a totally different personality to the text typing personality. So it's an inaccurate self-perception. It's putting yourself out there in a way that is not truthful. And what happens is it creates a disconnect. So people will see your online personality, your social media personality, and then they meet you in real life, and there's this gap.
Right.
And as there's that gap, we lose what's called endorsement. And basically people start to be distrustful of us.
Right.
We lose our credibility. And all of that comes into emotional intelligence.
Okay. And how do you start focusing on that when you've got all these distractions? Like, I personally started doing it similar to you. I think I had not as many in a row, but I had all these crises which made me look at myself, and I was able to then find it. But say if you don't have a crisis, what would be some of the steps to start to become that street smart version of yourself?
I think the first thing we've got to be aware of are the numbers. So 85% of the population claim to be emotionally intelligent.
But they're not really, are they?
The truth is only 10 to 15% are.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've done it before. My mum would say, you know, Daniel spends all the time looking at himself in the mirror. You know, and we're vain. We're vain. Yeah. We want to look our best. We want to portray something of greatness even when we don't have it. So what we have to do is we have to do a reality check. And we have to ask ourselves, what's the reality here? You know, how tall am I? We've got to know our numbers. How much do I weigh? You've got to jump on the scales. And you've got to start with an accurate self-perception.
Yeah.
And I've made that mistake many times. I've oversold myself. I've overpromised. But then I had to pay the price at the end, which is not a nice price to pay because you lose your reputation, you can lose your credibility, you lose your money, you lose your time.
So did you inflate yourself to sound like you were bigger but you weren't?
Overinflated.
Right.
Overinflated.
And do you think that's something do you think that that's on that point? Do you think a lot of guys do that?
Everybody does it. And it's a process of learning, but a lot of us aren't open to the feedback.
Yes.
You know, we say feedback is the breakfast of champions. And so we've got to be able to measure ourselves. So with emotional intelligence today, you can actually measure your levels of emotional intelligence, and it can be not compared but contrasted to other people in society. So you actually know where you are. But the point I want to make here, Joe, is that a higher emotional intelligence does not guarantee success. A higher level of emotional intelligence can actually be a limitation. And I've seen people with a lower level of emotional intelligence become self-made millionaires. However, the difference is they know their limits. They know who they are. And I'll give you the perfect example.
Even if their intelligence emotionally isn't there, they know how far they can go and they end up becoming successful anyway.
100%. It happened to me when I started my business in coaching. I had a passion for helping people. I really wanted to help people, and I could feel people's pain. Now, I didn't realize that was called an empath. So what would happen is I'd attract people that come in, and instead of doing a session where I was going to sell them a program, I would solve their problem. And at the end of the call, they go, Daniel, we love you. That was so great. If I ever need a coach, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah.
And then I've solved their problem. But actually, I wasn't serving them and I wasn't serving myself.
You like rescuing, you think? Was it like a rescuing thing?
Absolutely, because I couldn't control that empathy, become empathetic. So when we look at salespeople, what happens is if you've got a score in the area of empathy that goes above 90 to 95 towards 100, you actually become less effective in selling because you get caught up in the emotion, and then they give you an objection and you say, oh my gosh, if that was me, I'd have the same objection. I've got to stop selling. But the person wouldn't be on the phone with you if they didn't want to solve the problem. They wouldn't tell you what their problem was unless you wanted to solve it.
Yeah.
So what happens is these people with a very high level of empathy, where it turns into becoming an empath, it's of a disservice for themselves, their company, and their customer.
Mm.
Now, on the other side, sometimes people with a lower level of emotional intelligence are more effective in selling because they say, I understand that's all a bullshit story there, and you're on the phone and you've come into my business because you want to solve the problem. So let's just get that out of the way, and they sell. So that's how it can actually hurt and help you at the same time.
Like, I know this might be hard, but do you have an example of a person? Like, who would you consider to be someone that's emotionally intelligent besides yourself? You know, like who that we may know out there? And that's a hard one. So, because I think people, I personally recognise when I can see, because sometimes that word emotional can get confused. That's why I think you said it was a buzzword. So is Tony Robbins, say, emotionally intelligent?
Very, very emotionally intelligent.
So that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, if everybody knew Tony Robbins, well, the first thing that Tony embodies is self-awareness. He knows his strengths, he knows his weaknesses, but he's also got a very high level of confidence. So when you see a confident person, you know that they're very high in self-awareness.
Mm.
The second thing we look for in these people, which we can look at Tony Robbins, we could say he's excellent at regulating his emotions. So from a young age, he's been public speaking. And when you're a public speaker, you have to face the fear of rejection, criticism, and judgment. However, 99% of the population suffer from glossophobia, which is a fear of public speaking. So they don't speak their truth. And as Les Brown would say, is they take their music to the grave. So Tony Robbins can share his message on a stage of 25 and 30,000 people. He can deal with criticism with 25 or 30,000 people at a time. He's on the world stage and he's happy to put his voice out there, and you can see the trolls on the internet. They talk down about him, but what does he do? He keeps moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's also, he's got the attribute of resiliency, which is the third part of emotional intelligence. Tony Robbins has had many setbacks. He's had divorces. He's lost his business. He's had people cheat on him. They've had the Me Too movement on him. But what happened was he just kept rolling with those punches.
Yeah, you don't stop. You just, like you said, street smarts is that you adapt and you move forward and so on. So I know we touched upon this.
Another one, Joe Rogan.
Yes,
Joe Rogan.
I was going to say, like, that those big voices that they just keep moving even though they get punched all the time.
Yeah, because what happens is, in this area of emotional intelligence, Joe Rogan is very empathetic. So he knows the sound of the voice of the common person. And he's asking questions on behalf of people, which is an example of leadership. And then what he has the ability to do is to socially regulate, which is the ability to share his opinion at scale, but also be able to influence different platforms, influence the media, influence the UFC and these great big audiences. So Joe Rogan's another great example.
And he just recently had some sort of bumps recently, but again, he got up there, apologized, he clarified, and he just kept moving, which I admire that, you know. Do you think the everyday person, the everyday guy, even though that they may not become a Tony or a Joe, can still find their own version of that? And
100%.
And the part B is that one of the obstacles that I guess some guys have is that they only want to be big, and they don't realize even those small steps as a dad or as a partner or as a boss, you can utilize emotional intelligence in a positive way without having to be this grandiose version.
Well, when I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, it was who had the biggest chest, who could inject the most amount of steroids and have the biggest chest and the biggest arms and skip legs day. So it was so masculine, you had to be this rough, tough alpha. But we're going beyond the alpha and we're looking at the sigma today. And the sigma is the person who knows themselves. And as I've got older, what I've realized is that people appreciate me more for my emotional intelligence and my contributions to their business and my persona and characteristics than they do for my looks or my body.
Yeah.
My wife She says, I love you for who you are, not for your body. Hey, I'm getting a dad bod.
Yeah.
But my kids don't look at my dad bod and go, I can't love him because of his body. They look at me because of the way that I make them feel.
Yeah.
So for all men, what we've got to do is we've got to learn to choose our environment really well. Our environment is really is influential on us. So if we hang around 5 unemotionally intelligent people, we'll become the 6th. But you've got to gain the courage and you've got to overcome that fear of losing your stability. And you've got to go and find a group of men who have that emotional intelligence. It's not being feminine.
Yeah,
It's not being a pussy. It's not being a weakling.
No, it's being balanced. Really, you can't live your life. You know, when I'm from the West as well, so I understand.
Oh, beautiful.
You have this. You can only be one-sided. You can't be the other side. But now we're learning to be both, right? But the thing, you know, it's really interesting that you said only 10% of people are emotionally intelligent, which means there's a lot of people out there that are still doing the steroidy thing. Because I've noticed on Instagram and all those apps, the muscles and all that are coming, it's all about the body at the moment. But when you listen to these people talking, I think to myself, oh my God, like they've got nothing. And I don't mean to be rude.
Can you shut your mouth, please?
Well, I become a little bit frustrated that these people have got this following and they've got an opportunity to actually do something, but they're not. They're using their body as the means of the attraction, right? And so that sort of makes sense to why only 10% of people have emotional intelligence, because they have a better purpose. They want, like, your purpose is to help others. Well, if you were just posing pictures of yourself with a big chest on Instagram, that doesn't really change the world.
No. And the other thing, I think we've heard it from our mums and our grandmothers, beauty is only skin deep. And so one of the things with all humans is all of us are vain. All of us would prefer to see something beautiful than something ugly. So on a place like social media, where you're just quickly flicking through, all you do is look at these photos. Okay, big boobs, big chest. Next, what else have we got?
True. Your brain goes overdrive, doesn't it?
It goes overloads. But then when you meet these people, and I was a co-leader of a team of 17,500 cabin crew, and the most attractive people I met were the ones who could hold a conversation. And I could be on an aircraft flying from Dubai to San Francisco, and I could have a chat with one of the old ducks on the aircraft. I could chat to them for 10 or 12 hours during the flight. But sometimes just that super good looking guy or girl, you'd say hello, but there was no substance. And you could be on that aircraft for 16 hours at 40,000 feet, and literally you just stand there with your arms crossed in the galley. It's like, there is nothing to say.
Yeah.
There was no stimulation at all. There was no emotional content, there was no substance, there was no depth. And as we get older, I think we move past that vanity part and we look at this emotional intelligence. What does this person believe in? How willing are they to stand up for their beliefs? Are they willing to speak it out loud? And that becomes very confident. I've got some friends in business, I'm talking about these guys who are 5 foot, but I'll tell you what, they look 7 foot because they know themselves.
Yeah.
They know their strengths, they know their limitations, and they attract people to them. And nobody says, hey, you're short. They just go, wow, what a great personality. Magnetic. Yeah. I want some of that.
Yeah. I love what you're saying. And I've been, it's so nice to hear someone that is thinking what I've been thinking. But I'm not saying that there is, I'm not saying it's wrong or anything, but do you feel that we're still not like there yet? Because the way that you're talking, I love it because I feel like I'm living it, right? And the audience connects with that. But there still is, to me, that sort of divide still with the way someone looks versus what you're talking about. So where are we in reality? Like, are we getting there? Are we halfway? What's the future look like? It's a big it's a big question. Sorry.
We're not there, and I don't think we're ever going to get there.
Really?
I think just a small portion of the population will ever get there.
Wow.
I really believe that, because one of the things with emotional intelligence, it's not an inborn attribute.
Yeah.
It's an acquired attribute. You have to learn it. You've got to be disciplined. And we've all seen these photos on social media. The announcer gets up at the lectern and says, "Who wants change?" And everybody puts their hand up and said, "We want change."
Yeah.
And then they ask the next question, "Who's prepared to change?" And only 1 out of 100 people will put their hands up. So it's an acquired attribute. And to be able to succeed in this area, you've got to face your 4 silent fears. The first one is the fear of being taken advantage of. And that feeling is if somebody's taking advantage of you because you start to get angry. However, you've got to learn to manage that anger. And for as much as I know about emotional intelligence, the anger still gets the better of me at some times. So it's a continuous process of learning how to deal with the anger, because you're going to have a new situation and you've never been in these situations. You might master it once, but then something else comes at you and you've got to learn it again. Secondly, it's the fear of rejection. And it doesn't matter who you talk to for the rest of your life, there's an opportunity that somebody might reject you. They might criticize you. They might judge you. And so after you've been conditioned, and when I say conditioning, we've heard the word no 148,000 times before we're 18. And it's the word no that we fear. It's the fear of the fear. Oh my gosh, I can't deal with another no. And so it triggers off this feeling of rejection. Now, the more successful you want to become, if you want to step up in your career, if you want to step up in your business, like with me now, sometimes I do presentations to groups of 1,300 people at a time.
Wow.
Now, how do I handle 1,300 people disagreeing with me? It's a challenge, but I want to go further. All of us want more. So I don't want to talk to 1,300 people now. I want to speak to 3,000. And now I've got to relearn it. The other thing with things like COVID-19, it's forced us to face this fear of losing our stability. And a lot of people are out of their comfort zones. And what do they say? Oh, when COVID goes away, when the world returns back to normal. It ain't going back to normal.
Yeah.
And so we've got to face this all of our life. And then I think the biggest one we've got to face before we really get there as a community, as a society, it's this fear of trying and failing. And everything, especially relationships. I'm going to try to get into a new relationship, but what if it fails? Oh, well, I can keep the other one in the back pocket.
Yeah.
I'll try this business. When it fails, at least I can go back to my job. But a lot of people, then they suffer perfectionism. And they say, well, if I can't do it 100%, if I can't have exactly what I want, if I can't have a red Ferrari, I won't even have the black one.
Yeah.
So we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. But you mentioned something I relate to, and that is you mentioned all those things that happened to you, right? I went through a similar thing, and that was the thing that made me address some of the things that you talked about. How does someone do that? How does someone go into these steps without having a crisis? Because for me, I don't know about for you, but for me, I lost the ability to walk, right? And then,
Wow.
So like that was my universal message to stop. I can walk now, by the way. But in that moment where I couldn't walk, I had to like really look at myself and ask those questions. So that was a really big, I appreciate that now because I'm now here. But how does an everyday person that doesn't have a problem, you know what I mean? It's like, it's so, is that why you think we'll never get there? Because some people just will stay stuck in their ego story?
Well, they stay in the comfort zone.
Yeah.
And if you're in the comfort zone, everything's comfortable. It's all predictable.
Yeah.
And as long as you can stay in that zone, then you don't have to face any of this.
Yeah.
And,
So there's some, I guess
that.
there's some denial in there, isn't there?
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think people have got to realise that you've got to define success for yourself. And if success for you is being able to stay in a job for 30 years, retire and live out the rest of your life without a scar, and you achieve that, that is success. And you've got to appreciate your journey of success.
Yeah.
But for the people who want more, then you've got to constantly face it.
Yeah.
So let's do a little bit of education around it. When we go through a traumatic time, we have what's called a Uden moment. These traumas come unexpected.
Yeah.
They're dramatic. They're isolating, and we have no coping strategy.
And they're big.
And they're huge. And one thing with all humans is we're all ignorant, and we just don't know what we don't know. And if you don't know what you don't know, you can't ask questions. So this is the education of it. So we have these Uden moments, unexpected, dramatic, isolating, no strategy. And then what we end up going through is called a grief cycle. And the first part of the grief cycle is we're in denial. And if we think about COVID-19, it's the China virus. It's the seasonal flu. It's going to disappear. So everybody put their head in the sand for a while until you realise that this was the real deal. So after you go through denial, then you get angry. So if you start to see yourself getting angry, this should be the sign that you're going through a crisis. And anger we saw in Australia because people were fighting over bog roll. They're fighting over toilet paper. And people are fighting over toilet paper. We're in a crisis.
Yes.
So we have that.
Did they see it as a crisis, you think?
Well, they don't, because they don't know what a crisis looks like.
Right.
They don't understand the grief cycle.
Okay.
They just go through this experience without an understanding of what's happening.
Yeah.
So you get denial, you get angry, and then you blame. So who do we blame? We blame China. Yeah. And after we can't blame China, we blame the government. And then we blame the state
Each other,
government.
and then each other.
And then we blame the boss. And then we blame the husband, the wife, and all of that. And that's blame. And then after blame, we go into depression. And essentially we go into the pit of despair. And inside of depression, and a lot of men don't realise this, is there's a lot of anger in depression. And I was depressed back in 2013. And I was diagnosed with depression, and I was angry. I resented my wife for her accident. I resented the company because I couldn't get time off. I was angry at myself. I was angry at the future. I was angry at other people around me who were succeeding. And so we don't recognise depression for what it is. There's a lot of anger in sadness.
Yeah.
And it's the sadness that sits below the anger. So until we get angry, we really don't feel the sadness.
Yeah.
And then it's the final step after that, which we've all got to get to, which is acceptance. We have to say, this is the reality. This is what's happening. I accept it, and now I have to navigate and course correct and get my way out of it.
How did you get through the anger part for you? Like, how did you, when you were angry with all those situations and you found acceptance? You know, a lot of people are going to be thinking of, is it quick overnight? It took a while, didn't it? Like, there was a period of time. So what was the main thing for you? What did you do so you could start to accept the truth?
Well, the first thing, my wife had an accident in 2010, but the experience started in 2009. So we were living in Dubai, and my wife would say to me, husband, I want to get a job where I get paid to do nothing. I said, wouldn't we all want that? A job where we got paid to do nothing. And she said it on repeat. And I said to her, I said, you've got to be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. So when that phone call came through at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was already angry because I'd been saying to my wife, be careful what you wish for.
Wow.
You might just get it. And I believe in self-fulfilling prophecies. I believe in psychosomatic illness, and it comes as a message. Like when you stop walking, it comes as a message if you're aware of it. So I'd said to my wife, I believe that you have co-created this. I don't believe you did it consciously.
Yeah.
But the vibe you're putting out there, you wanted to achieve
led
that.
to it. Yeah.
And the doctor said to her, hey, congratulations, you're not going to work, you're not going to walk, you're not going to work for 2.5 years. And the company said, well, congratulations, we're going to pay you for 2.5 years. So what did she get? She got a job where she got paid to do nothing.
Wow.
And so as we went through that experience, I'm feeling very numb because I come home one night, I've been out doing what I love, which is flying around the world. And there's my wife with a knife in her hand, and she wants to end a life. So I'm, in a way, I feel like I'm part of this. I'm getting dragged down into it. So I'm angry at her. I'm resenting her. I'm not enjoying my career, my health suffering. And so in 2013, it was just the realization when I went to the hospital and I said to the doctor, I think I've got a lung infection. And he said, let's check you out. And they did the x-rays, the blood test, and they said, Mr. Tolson, you're fine. It's all in the mind.
Wow.
You've got to go and see a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I went to the psychologist. She explained to me that I was depressed, and very quickly I accepted it. I had repressed it very well for years, but I just accepted it at that stage. Now, I was educated and I knew how to get my way through it. But for that 3 years before, I just repressed it. I just pretended everything was fine.
Mm.
So
Isn't it amazing?
3 years to get there.
Because that's the same. I was like not accepting I couldn't walk. And then I had a coach and he was telling me, have you accepted it? And I'm going, yeah. And he goes, no, you haven't. And then when I did accept it, I walked.
Yep.
It was so powerful. Just, I felt like I had to jump off of a cliff and not know where I was going to land. And I just had to say, I'm okay. And because all the other times I was saying, yeah, I could jump, but I wanted to know where I was going to land. Sorry.
Have you ever looked at a tarot deck?
It's like a tarot cards.
The tarot cards?
Yep.
Okay,
I don't know them off by heart or anything, but I've looked at them before.
So what you're talking about here is the card of the Fool. Now, the Fool doesn't mean you're a fool, by the way. It's just our approach to life. So the card 0 of the tarot, which is of the major arcana, represents the Fool. And the Fool is standing off on the side of the cliff. But what the Fool has to do is it has to jump. And it has to give their power over to God or the universe. And we say with the card of the 0, the Fool, you've got to jump and the net will appear.
Mm.
So what happens in life, people want to jump, but they want guarantees.
Yes.
What you've got to do is you've got to learn to jump and grow the wings on the way down.
Yeah. And what I've sort of taken away from that is I let go of the expectation, realizing that wherever I land is just the same as anywhere else. And that was something that that's why I said I'm thankful for the not walking, because before I wanted to know. Even though I pretended that I didn't care, I did want to know. Now I just feel like I just spend, like, every day presents what it presents. And, I look at the fact that I'm talking to you. I wouldn't have done this podcast if I didn't know how to walk. That whole thing opened up all these doors. And I think, people have to just sort of like be open to the fact that having no idea is better than saying no because you want it to look like the way you want it to look.
100%.
Is that something you see a lot of?
All of it. I think Steve Jobs says you can't see the dots when you're moving forward. You can only see how the dots connect when you look backwards. And this is the self-awareness piece. It's having that awareness. And when I grew up with learning disabilities, I was diagnosed at age 11, spent 5 years in remedial therapy, then contracted Epstein Barr virus, chronic fatigue, dropped out of school, had 2 major knee surgeries in 2 consecutive years and spent 2 years in rehabilitation, and then fell through a toilet and cut my arse cheek in half. Now, when I look back on that, I wouldn't have those stories to tell with what I'm doing today. So it would be impossible to do what I'm doing today.
Yes.
If I didn't have those.
I mean, you've had a lot happen, haven't you?
Yeah, and I'm going to have a lot more for sure.
Yeah, but what I feel is that you're quite grateful for those experiences where they're useful, but other people would have only one of those experiences, and some people hold on to that so tight and they tell the story in a negative way. So what would be your message to the world? Like, what would be something that you basically say to everyone in either a workshop or a podcast? I mean, we've got to hear your mantra and the way that you live your life, which is so amazing. But if you could give a message, what would it be?
What you're made of, your DNA, can be stretched out from where you are today to the sun and back 300 times. And what that means is that you are absolutely unlimited in your potential. Most of us are playing on as little as 2% of our potential. People that we know, like Einstein, are reported to use about 10% of their potential. So you are so much more than you think you are. And you've just got to learn to stretch yourself. And you've got to stretch, you've got to stretch, and you've got to stretch. And then you'll shock yourself and you'll say, oh my gosh, I can actually go so much further. Yeah. And that's the importance of incremental growth. If you just improve your performance by 1% every month for 10 months, you'll double your performance. There's people out there, it takes the average person 70 years to double their income. But when you have a look around, high performers double their income every 7 years. And so if you can see somebody else do it, it's also possible for you. Yeah. The only question you've got to ask is, how can I do it? So you've got to start asking the question, how? How can I do it? How can I make this happen? And that's the key.
Yeah. I could talk to you for hours. Let's do it. I mean, I definitely want to reach out and get you back on, because I think one thing that I love about meeting people is when I meet someone that can explain something easily and succinctly, it is a gift, because I think there is a lot of confusion out there. And, if only 10% of the world's using the, emotional intelligence and the other 90% are lost, then they really want a messenger that's going to share it rather than, stupid politicians or people that give them the wrong sort of message. So it's nice to talk to you, and hopefully we can get you back on.
100%. Let's do it, Joe.
So thank you, Daniel. And hopefully, we'll see you soon. And by the way, all your information is going to be linked below. So if anyone wants to reach out to Daniel, just click on the links or go and read his bio that I'm going to put on there. And he is one of the most friendliest people, I have to say. And is that your wife? That's your assistant?
That's the reason my wife is Miss Taiwan. She's the one with the lion on my Facebook page.
Okay, yeah, because I've been getting messages from all these other people going, Daniel's got them trained well. So I will make sure that everyone's got access to you. So thank you again.
Thank you, Joe.
So you've been listening to the Secret Men's Business podcast. Now, the podcast is out every Monday. Now, don't forget, hit like and subscribe. We've got over 200 podcasts now. There's a back catalogue of wealth of knowledge and information, guys. So make sure you go and listen. Have a great week, and we'll see you all next time. Bye. Thank you.
Wow, superstar hosting. I loved it.
No,
great energy.
Really? Thank you.
Great dynamic.
But you are, I want to be you now when I grow up. You know what I mean? It's like you've just got this thing that's just charisma, this normal. It's just normal for you, and I love it. I just want to learn off you. So I'm going to go researching you more deeper, and listening to other things you've done. So thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy man,
My pleasure, mate.
And I can tell that you are generous. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything you need, you reach out. We'll
Cool.
spread this across our networks for you. So
Yeah, it'll be about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, okay?
okay, Reeza will take care of that. And if you want me to come back and talk more, you just reach out and I'll be there.
Yeah. I mean, like, you remind me of, you know, what's that guy, Joe Rogan? You remind me of him. You've got that same energy as him. You should be him.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right,
That's
I'll let
very
you
kind.
go. And thank you again. Bye.